I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Wednesday, October the 31st, where the futures not impressed with either the big gains in the fat cattle market last week, these getting through all those big heavy market ready supplies and seemingly being on the downhill slide of those. Not overly impressed with the bullish cattle on feed report that we had the last time. Not impressed with the feeder market choking all these big calves that are flooding the market, and not impressed with the monster prices that the few yearlings that we have left are bringing. But basically just not impressed with much of anything, and no support at all, which is kind of holding the market back. And now we're starting to get the feeling that we're not going to get that $130 fat cattle market before the end of the year. A month ago, a lot of us thought that that was sure in the cards, but you know, we don't have enough faith in, we love the handful of guys that still sell negotiated cash. They're the only ones holding this industry together. And we love the market cooperatives that are working, your consolidated beef producers, your Omaha producers, you know, the guys that pool the cattle and try to sell them. But it's hard to have any confidence that within just a couple of months that they're going to be able to gain that much ground in your cash negotiated fat cattle market. You know, you got to ask more for the cattle before you can get it. And we've got too many Northern Plains feeders that don't have enough contact. They just want to get the cattle shucked. They don't want to have to worry about holding them. They want to keep the cattle moving through the system, and by the time they get through selling early in the week, which they didn't last week so much, and that's one of the reasons we gained ground, but by the time they get through kind of petering off those cattle early in the week on in the Northern Plains, your guys in the Southern Plains are just kind of holding the bag, and then they're forced to take that market. But we should have already gained, you know, we should already be at $1.20. We spent too many weeks at $1.11 there, just jacking around here and there, and packers buying cattle dressed and paying the freight on them, and just, you know, hauling cattle $4 or $5 freight to keep the market from going up $1. They just did everything they could to keep the market at bay as long as they could, and now they've probably prevented us from, or the cattle market from achieving what it could have achieved. But maybe get into the 120s by the end of the year, but probably won't reach the 124 that we got last year, and sure won't get that 130 that we were thinking about there several weeks ago. But let's look at the board on Tuesday, October live cattle futures. Now we're getting right down to the very end here. Today will be it, but down 40 cents at $113.90 on a $115 market in a time of the year where we normally run spot on or a negative basis there. December down 45 cents at $116.80, only about a less than $3 premium the December to October, and that was running a whole lot more than that here just not too long ago. November feeder cattle down $1.72 at $152.17, and January down $172 also at $148.10. Fat cattle market, we haven't seen any trade really to speak of. We did see that 114 trade that we were talking about, that we'd heard rumors of, and that's about it. Just some 114 in Iowa, which is actually bullish because they didn't get that last week. They were 113 was about all they could squeeze on a live basis up there, but we'd sure like to see them hold off because we know these packers are hungry and aggressive, want to keep these chain speeds going, and we're starting to get on the downhill slide of these big supplies of market-ready cattle. And if we could just hold off selling those cattle until later in the week, whenever the packers kind of have to tip their hand and they can get those Kansas guys in there with more leverage and really squeeze some gains out of this market. Box beef cutout value is still strong. They're gaining ground just like they gained a lot of ground last week. But choice cuts Tuesday afternoon at $215.28, up $1.52. Select at $202.88, up $177. Choice select spread at $12.40. Let's look at your feeder cattle market. Your real-time index value put together through Cattle Market Central there. Ended the day on Tuesday at 152.15, just 2 cents off what your November feeder cattle is, but up 76 cents for compared to Monday, late Monday, and actually that is not bad. Because we did see some sales, big sales up in the northern plains, which may be under pressure, but still have a premium market to most sales in the southern plains, and that helped the market, but probably not much of a gain. We're kind of seeing a lot of steady and maybe a mixed a little bit one way or the other depending on the weights, but not a runaway here on the feeder cattle market this week. Philip the Giant, big sale every Tuesday this time of year. Philip, South Dakota. You can watch it every week right here on DB Auction and Bid if you want to. Over 13,000 head of cattle on a Tuesday. Big sales up there, I tell you what. But I looked at the Cattle Market Central automated market report there. The sale was still going on when I recorded this on Tuesday evening. But on the steers, almost 4,100 head of 5-weight steers, average 558 at 173.61. That weighted average was about $3 lower than last week's weighted average. On your 5-weight heifers, over 2,500 head of 5-weight heifers, average 539 at 161.06 on the weighted average. That was actually about $4 better than the weighted average a week ago. And on some 6-weight steers, over 2,550 head of 6-weight steers, average 633 at 168 even, and that was down just about $1. So still moving a lot of cattle through that market up there, and prices staying good despite heavy receipts. And some of these calves might actually look like a bargain compared to what the last of the green yearlings are bringing. But you know, we've talked about it. We talk about it every year. I've talked about it for the last couple of months. But just moving those cattle, a lot of them short weaned or not weaned at all, and moving those cattle, and those cattle have most of them been supplementally fed, creep fed, plus mother's milk, and just never had a bad day. Those cattle have, you know, never been away from home before, and you haul them somewhere new, and it's tough, especially on some of these big calves. I was talking to a friend of mine that's in the animal health business here a couple of days ago, and he was called me about the visit I had at the end of last week, talking about sometimes maybe we got the genetics too good, and we're weaning calves weighing nearly 800 pounds. You know, not that we shouldn't want to do that, but maybe we ought to wean them a little bit earlier, put some value in those cattle. And he was kind of in charge of overseeing health on some big outfits there, and talking about some of these big outfits trying to straighten up these big heavy calves. And he said they don't have the system, the respiratory system and everything to handle what their big body is susceptible to. And the way he put it to me, which is a good analogy to use, he said you've got a Mack truck with a Volkswagen radiator in it, and it's when those cattle get shown disease, that they get exposed to airborne illnesses and things. When we haven't seen a hard freeze in most of our areas where we're trying to straighten these calves up, we've got a lot of cattle moving around. They're exposed to a lot of different things. And he said you just can't hardly save one of them, because they're really they've put on more muscle, more size, more mass than what they really their insides really have a right to try to keep up with, and it's hard to save them. But in Philip, they quoted some calves. I've been talking about trying to get a 500-pound calf to bring $2 a pound. 3 or 4 weeks ago, it was happening pretty often. The last couple of weeks, we haven't seen it happen. Philip, South Dakota, on Tuesday, 108 head of 494-pound steers bring $200.50. So that's an impressive quote there, especially as many calves that they had. You had buyers there. They could have been selective and not give that kind of money for those calves, but good calves there will still bring it all. West Plains, Missouri, Ozarks Regional Stockyards, 3,100 head there. Another string of cattle from the Gardner outfit in Batesville, Arkansas. They have sold a world of green yearlings through Ozarks Regional Stockyards there, and they had another big string of them this week on Tuesday. 220 head of mixed steers. They ran out of the all blacks, but mixed steers, 903 pounds at 153.50, just about steady with what they had last week. Fredonia, Kansas had a good sale. They had 120 head of mixed steers, 780 pounds there at 161.85. Pretty impressive quote there out of eastern Kansas. Unionville Livestock Market, Unionville, Missouri, had 4 loads of good black steers off the Rockin' R outfit, which is close by there. They weighed 830 to 865 pounds on the average of the loads, bring from 162.35 to 163.60, and then had another load off of them, just wasn't quite as attractive, similar weight at 158.50, and that's nothing to slouch at, but those 4 premium loads really bring the ticket. Riverton, Wyoming, they can sell light calves up there. 85 head of 390 pound steer calves bring $215.75. They're probably headed to wheat somewhere. Kingsville, Missouri, West Central Missouri sale. 4 loads off Steve Varner from Odessa, Missouri. 880 pounds to 890 pounds. That's impressive. 4 loads put together yearlings, and when you bring them, they average within 10 pounds of each other, but had some good buying activity there on those 880 to 890 pound loads of steers. 159.5 to 161.85, and that's your feeder flash for Wednesday.